There's always one more thing that you have to do as a podcast, isn't there? There's always one more thing that someone's telling you that you should do, and there's always something that we're looking for to be the magic bullet when it comes to our podcast's growth. And one of those things very often is transcription. A lot of people I know swear by it. A lot of people I know really, really do not like it. So let's look today at whether or not you should transcribe your podcast. In my humble opinion, and based on my experience of working with all of the podcasters that I work with, of course, via Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. I'm your host of this show, Mr. Mark Asquith, the CEO and co-founder of Rebel Base Media. We are the podcast tech company that, of course, makes Captivate.fm, but, of course, makes a pile of other software as well, including podcast websites, the world's #1 managed WordPress platform, and Podcast Success Academy, plus the cheeky little startup Productivity. Reason that I tell you that is that we are all in on podcasting, which is why I do this show, to help you with questions like this. Before we dive in, I want to give a bit of a shout out to my friends over at AWeber. Of course, they sponsor this podcast. They've been a supporter of this show for a long, long time, since day one, and a supporter of all of my previous shows as well. We've worked together for years now in podcasting, and they've also powered my email marketing for the last 10 years, which is insane. I've had no reason to move from them because their customer service is fantastic, and they helped me to learn email marketing, which they can do for you as well. So in case you are just thinking to yourself, look, why am I not building relationships like other podcasters seem to do with their listeners? Email marketing is probably the thing that you're missing. So go and check it out, markasquith.com/AWeber. So like I said, transcription is something that some people swear by in podcasting and others really do not like. But what are the pros and cons of transcribing your show? Well, look, the first thing we've got to think about here with transcription is that there are various sides to it. There's the technical side of it. How do you actually do this? Then there's the should you side of it. Will it really benefit people? Will it really benefit people? Now, the thing that I will say, there are two things I'll say off the bat with this, first and foremost, is, number one, if you are seeing transcription as a feature of some plugin, like there are some WordPress-based podcast players, for example, that will just put on their features page a little tick box saying, yes, supports transcription or does transcription, whatever. That, just because it's a feature of something doesn't mean it's the right thing. So the reason that I'm saying that is that so many podcasters are spending a lot of money on a lot of things right now. And we're seeing through Captivate, through the support channel, people saying, well, look, actually, I'm going to move to Captivate because most of the stuff that I spend money on elsewhere is included with Captivate already. And the reason that I think that is important is that you have to understand that you should only really spend on things that actually move the needle for your show. So that's the first thing that I want to say. The second thing that I want to say is that transcription, in my view, should never, ever, ever replace show notes. It's not a one or the other. Your transcription should never, ever, ever replace your podcast show notes. And the reason for that is very, very simple. The transcription is what you talk about. It's what you say. It is pretty much the episode transcribed, because that's the word that we're dealing with, transcription. The show notes are about the show. They're about the episode. They're the actionable takeaways. That's a summary. It's the details at the top level that enhance the podcast episode, that don't replace the podcast episode, but that enhance it. And it's that replacement that I want to talk about in particular when it comes to transcription, because ultimately what you're doing here is you're saying that if I transcribe my show, regardless of how much work it may or may not be, I am going to give other people a way of consuming my show without listening to it. Now, there are pros and cons to this. The big pro, of course, is accessibility. It becomes much easier for someone that is difficult of hearing or has hearing impairment to enjoy your podcast if they can read it. You know, you're opening up the accessible market, which is absolutely not a bad thing. The world should be as accessible as possible, from software to content. So if your goal here is for transcription to help with your accessibility, and that is a very, very, very honorable thing to do. And yes, you should probably consider it. I think that's a fantastic thing to do. But on the flip side of that, if actually, you know, you don't necessarily have the time to do the transcription properly, the accessibility side of things can really actually probably suffer. So you have to do transcription well if you're going to do it at all. Which then leads me on to my next point, which is, do you know what? it's not always that easy. Sure, there are apps and services out there that will do it for you. Rev.com, rev.com. There are things like Descript, which is fantastic. And, it's kind of cool. It works really well. But there's always a big element of work. And the longer that your podcast is, doesn't matter what automated tool you use, you will have to check word for word, the transcription that your service provides. Okay, and you will have to edit it. So that's an extra workload on top of you. You can't just automate transcription, sadly, and make sure that it's absolutely perfect, because it isn't. And you don't want to publish something that's not right, with typos in there or missing words or the wrong context or whatever. You don't want to be doing any of that. You have to edit it. So that's the next big consideration, is that, you know what? It's a lot more work. Next, is it good for SEO? Honestly, for the most part, it won't do too much to enhance your search engine optimization, because that's not quite how search engines work, okay? High quality show notes and decent keyword research, they are the things that are going to really enhance your search engine visibility. Having said that, transcription is good for what we call long tail search. So when someone's searching for a very specific phrase, or slightly longer phrase, and it happens to show up in your show, then transcription, of course, will help with that. But what we need to weigh up as a podcaster is, can we do transcription well? Can we afford to do it? And can we do this in such a way that it is very, very high quality without adding a pile to our workload? Because if we can't, we've got to weight that against the pros that we get from it, the accessibility, the bit of search engine optimization, extra visibility that we're going to get from it. So I think the point of this is that, look, in an ideal world, if you have a podcast team, yes, transcription is great, but the only way to do it is to do it very, very well. Yes, maybe use something like Descript or Rev.com to get you 80% of the way there, and then edit it yourself or get your team members to edit it. But unless you can do it really, really well, I think you will be better spending your time on other things like building your audience, starting to monetize your show so you can invest in transcription being done properly to then open up the accessible market and really start to help people with accessibility challenges to access your content as well, all right? Sadly, as podcasters, we can't do everything all at once, okay? It would be really nice if we could, but sadly we can't. So that is my suggestion. It's that, yes, we consider transcription, but unless we can do it exceptionally well, we don't do it until that point, okay? Until we can afford to either spend the time or the money on doing it really, really well. Honestly, I would suggest that you spend more time building your audience and getting to a point where you can afford to do transcription very, very well, okay? And then it becomes just one part of your content and your marketing process, okay? So that's my take on transcription. I'm sure that some people will disagree with that. That's all right. That's the world that we live in. That's fantastic. It's everyone's right to be able to do that, and certainly no one is wrong, okay? It's just opinions. And I'm talking specifically here to the independent podcasters, the people in their bedrooms recording their shows because they love it, okay? And struggling to build that audience, all right? So we have to pick our fights when it comes to what we do with our podcast, okay? And I think transcription is maybe just a touch further down the list than some other things, okay? That's what I would just say with that one. So listen, if you need a hand with anything, hit me up, mark at rebelbasemedia.io, at Mr. Asquith on the old Twitter. And until the next time, thank you for joining me. Stay safe, stay sane, and never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.